So you're in the right place, and we are going to get started. This is Mongoose. Thank you for joining us. We're going to talk about increasing student retention in 2022, especially with the holiday break coming up. And this is all about your Q&As. So we want to answer questions. Retention, of course, as we know, is a 365-day-a-week job, and students face so many obstacles and tough things, especially during this time of year. And so we want to talk about retention. I'm Greg Bauch, the content production manager here at Mongoose. Mike Kochczynski, our client success lead and partner manager. What do you think, Mike, retention in 2022?
Yeah, absolutely. 365 job. You're absolutely right. But one of the things we have to remember is I've sometimes heard institutions say retention is everyone's job. And in my experience, if something is everyone's job, it is actually no one's job. So it should be very important that your institution is tracking, particularly over these winter months. Students who are potentially at risk, students who have stopped out of the institution, students who have obscenely high absences. So you can really reach out to those students over break and make sure they're getting the resources they need to return for the next semester if possible.
And the fun thing about Mongoose is that we have so many different schools that we deal with, and there's so many different schools in higher ed. So I don't want to say this is like a full disclosure statement, but every school is different. Make sure your institution is represented in our question, because we're prepared to answer if you have a 40,000 student population or just 300. So, but because the cases are different for each one. So make sure that your institution and the demographics of that institution are represented, because we like to get into the weeds here in Mongoose webinars. We operate without slide decks, and that way we can, go without a net, I guess I would say. So we're going to get into it. The questions about Q&A. If you have no questions, we can still talk for an hour about this kind of thing, about clearing up processes for your institution, making sure students know that resources are available. We love to talk about this kind of thing, but we do have some questions that came in. So I'm going to get to those. Mike, are you ready to answer some questions?
I am born
Okay,
ready.
good. If you said no, I don't know what I would have done. Like I might have stalled or something. But thank you for saying yes. Thank you for your questions that have come in ahead of time when you registered. We super appreciate that. So, Mike, as a community college, we see a noticeable drop over winter and summer breaks. What advice do you have for community colleges struggling with student retention?
Yes. So there's a lot of media out there about the reasoning for students stopping out. And I think it's important that we do not stereotype or we don't make assumptions about our population. So a lot of the national media would say, oh, students are giving up academic opportunities to pursue a career or a job instead because the cost of attending a higher education institution is too high. And that might very well be true for your students, but we shouldn't make assumptions. So as much as we can, we should investigate what the issues are for those students. It could be financial, could be issues with the family, homesick, whatever the case might be. Academic preparation. There's lots of reasons why somebody might not return for the next semester. And we shouldn't assume that our students are a monolith. So we should reach out to them, find out what ails them, frankly, text them, find out what resources you can give them, and kind of move from there.
Yeah, finances usually play a huge part in whether it's just melt or like a lack of communication with students where they kind of drop off. But it is, as Mike said, not the only reason. Mike, what are the most common questions and concerns you've seen come up via text? We deal with a lot of institutions that send and receive a lot of text. So what are the most common questions that I guess Mongoose sees?
It's very rare that we see a text come in without some type of solicited response. So, for example, it'd be very odd for student X to text into an institution and say, hey, I'm having issues with whatever the case might be. So usually it comes from a registrar or academic advisor, an admissions advisor or counselor texting in and saying, hey, Greg, we don't see XYZ paperwork for you to register for the next semester. How can I help you? And then it leads to a conversation, like we've said, potentially finances, potentially, homesickness, potentially academic issues, whatever the case might be. Literally today there was an institution here in upstate New York, texted out reminding students about study hall and tutoring options as students go into finals. And a student texted back, I'm failing everything. I'm so stressed out. And so I texted that student back, like, okay, well, let's meet. Let's talk about a plan. Let's see what we can do to help. Maybe hope is lost, but probably not. We can work with you on some resources, make sure you nail that final, and then we can help you with conversations with your faculty, your professors, so you can try to move on wherever possible. So that's usually what I see. Are the most common cases: academic preparation or academic issues, financial issues, and then some type of pull from the family.
And that's even that the answer to that question. That's a super difficult text to get, and maybe you
Yes.
can't help that student achieve what they need to achieve at that time. But when they send that text, that student's just in a really bad place. And so many of our schools and institutions nowadays want more resources on, want more information on, are looking more into just mental health, and like how many students need lifelines and texts like that. So even if that student can't pull their grades together in terms of passing that semester, just getting a response to that text is super important at that time.
Yeah, and if I may throw it out there,
Sure.
Greg, a lot of students aren't in a place where they feel comfortable asking or don't know
Mhm.
how to ask too. So, giving out that initial text, sending it out and saying, hey, we're here to help. We want you to continue at this institution. We want to make sure you get as much out of your experience at our school as possible. That goes a long way, because there are students who don't even know how to ask or don't even know how to approach getting those resources. And in a lot of cases, those resources are available.
Cool. So my next question to read off, it came up in our Q&A thing. This has been asked a bunch of different times. We had questions submitted before the webinar, and a different version of this question was asked a bunch, but I want to go to the live one and read it off. So this question is going to be multiple. So if you send it ahead of time, or whether you send it now, we appreciate that. We're going to answer it probably in a couple different ways. Here's the question from an anonymous attendee. We're exploring different ways of engaging students. Well, you just got rid of it. I have to click over. Mike
Sorry.
is super quick on the trigger thing.
Yes.
It's
It's
okay.
all the
This is like,
caffeine.
we're broadcasting live, folks, so mistakes like this happen. It's okay. I'm back on it. We're exploring different ways of engaging students while we're out of office in the holidays. How can we be engaging them via email and text while avoiding spam-like experiences? Like a lot of staffers are concerned about this.
So every text you send should have a purpose, should have a very clear population as well. So I would avoid blasting things out to the entire student body, but I would target students that, maybe this is their first time home after their first semester away. So maybe these are out of state students or students who aren't local. These might be students who, for whatever reason, academically came up as at risk students. But whatever that criteria is, build that out, make sure that you're not texting everybody. But two things will go a long way outside of the segmentation and the purpose, and that is keeping your language very personalized and making sure that somebody knows how to respond to that text. So, for example, a text should say, Greg, I hope you have an amazing winter break. We look forward to seeing you in January. Please let me know if I can help with any questions while you're off campus until the next semester. Look forward to seeing you in January, something like that. It doesn't have to be overwrote or anything like that. It can just be really simple. Hey, we're thinking of you. Just want to make sure you're doing fine. Anything we can help with, let us know.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I like to dive a little bit more into that. So that's the meat of that text. Let's get into more of how a student receives that text and or email. And by that I mean, when your phone pings and you look down at your phone, what do you see? What's going to make you open that text? What's going to help you? And I like to talk to our clients about like that preview text or that preview email, the subject line of the email, and making sure that that is not scary and robotic. And how do you get personal in 4 words? Because when a student picks up their phone and they get a text from you, they're going to see 4 words on their screen. That's going to let them know, like, am I going to open this, or is this spam? Is this something I want to see? So in trying not to be spammy, think about the first impression your text makes and what's in that preview box. Make sure the words that you send right away are very important. And that doesn't mean they have to be some magical, sentence from A Tale of Two Cities. It just means make sure it's personal, make sure it's relevant. It could start with, "Hey, Mike," or, like that's super personal. And now I know that this text isn't coming from a robot, like, even though it might be like auto sent, there's an actual human being on the other side of that text. So letting them know right away that what this text is about is pretty important. And so you might want to like play around with that thought base. When you're sending a text, think about what the first 4 to 6 words are of that text, and whether or not it's going to be open. Because if it says something like attention, we say this all the time, that's really going to be ignored because it just looks like a robot sent that text. So think about the preview text.
Absolutely.
You agree? Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Absolutely.
Also, you're not spamming someone if you're helping them. That and Mike said that, so that's important to note as well. A follow-up to that comes in from Michelle. What is the frequency of engagement method? Some email, some social, some text. I like this. I have a formula for it. I want to see if Mike's is the same formula. It probably is, but Mike, you go ahead and tackle that.
Well, I would say that most students will tell you in their reactions, in their responses, both the actual responses and just ignoring your text, how often they want to engage with you. Some people will use text as a way to follow up on an email or a post, and they'll say, "Hey, did you see what we posted on Instagram, on our Instagram story?" Or, "Hey, did you get this email about grades being open or out there?" So you could do those sorts of things. I would say that your most engaged students, the people who paint their faces, go to athletic events, on student government, super involved, the most I would ever see somebody like that who's very involved receiving a text is probably no more than once a week. Over a winter break, obviously that's going to go down as well. I would say most current students, you're probably looking at maybe once every 2 weeks, once a month for most of your student population. But Greg, what's your formula?
So the follow-up is a good example. So I would say, first off, do what works. So, we work for Mongoose. Obviously, we have Cadence, this amazing texting platform. If emails work best for you, it's about helping students make sure that you're sending emails, but a texting platform or text in general can definitely supplement them well. So like that 1-to-1, like email, text, email follow-up, if it's something very important, send an email. Send a text. "Hey, did you get that email?" With an email, you can be a little more robust. So that text might just draw their attention to that email. So they make sure they do that. Sometimes if you're sending links, they certainly work better inside of emails. So you can send an email with a link that needs to be followed. Send the text, "Hey, I just sent you a link to make sure that you fill out this form. Can you check out that email and make sure?" And so they definitely supplement each other well. And then following that with another follow-up email. So using them in conjunction, 1-day email, 1-day text, and then the follow-up after that works. So, and obviously it depends on what you're sending. Mike talks about doing it once a week, and that's smart. So you don't want to be just constantly sending emails and texts that follow each other, but it is very, very effective to start with an email and follow up with a text. What you said before, I wanted to make a point about, because it's funny, you worry about spamming students. If you're helping students, you're not spamming students. One thing schools have concerns about is during this long winter break, whether or not you should just send like a holiday greeting or something like that via text. And I would say, don't worry about the text that you don't send. Students don't sit around wondering why they haven't heard from Mongoose University in a couple of weeks. So, holiday greetings and things like that can be nice, but they can also be construed as spam. So if a student is sitting around on Christmas Eve or a holiday and they get a happy winter break email from you, or a happy winter break text from you, that might be nice, but do they actually need that? They're not wondering where you are. They're just trying to live their life. So if they receive a text as helpful, then send it. If it's not helpful, I think a good rule of thumb, Mike, is just not send it at all.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree with that.
Good. So there you go. You don't have to worry about that. Question that was sent in before the webinar. Once a student enrolls, Mike, how much of our texting should be focused on parents and how much on students?
Oh, great question. Depends on the institution. Some institutions are very oriented towards parental engagement. They have a team, an office, a person on staff who works in a family relations, parent relations role. And it's really key to the admissions process and then the students enrolling there and in continuing their studies. Some institutions say, nope, loco parentis, we take on the relationship here between the students. We are essentially sort of a caregiver. We're the molders of minds and scholars here. So your student is on their own, but we're going to help them through. So it depends on the institution. I would say that every institution should have a mongoose.edu/parent website where parents know what the academic calendar looks like, so they can be allies with you and reminding their students to get stuff done for you. And then also potentially sign up for newsletters and sign up for, potentially text alerts so they can know, hey, grades came in this week. This is probably a good week to talk to Greg about how, Philosophy 101 went or whatever the case might be. But really depends on the institution. I would err on the side of your students are either young adults or working adults who decided to invest in their education. So to do that requires a certain amount of drive and motivation, and I would err on the side of developing that tenacity, that persistence, as much as you possibly can.
And of course, this is no secret to anyone watching this webinar that oftentimes you are talking with the parent, because sometimes parents take control of that altogether. So I'm sure you know that already, but always keep that in mind, that when you're communicating with the student, you're very often time communicating with the parents. And don't be afraid to make that known. Like, if there's a situation where you think you're communicating with a parent, tell that parent, hey, we don't have to do this in secret. Let's talk. Here's a separate channel. Leave your number if you'd rather me communicate with them. If that situation's right, obviously that depends on the situation. But sometimes when you're getting information from a student in the process of applying to and enrolling in your school, and you ask if they want to receive text communications, leave this phone number. Why not have a spot to, if this is a parent or guardian, do they want to receive, text or communication? So that way, who you're communicating with, and that just makes things smoother. So open lines of communication are always important. And if the parent wants to talk to the school, make sure that they have that resource available. Like Mike said, with the webpage, that's for parents because they have questions. And even if they can't be involved in everything, they like to know what's going on. A couple of notes came in. Maggie says we were talking about the preview text information, and I like this for Maggie. She says, with Mongoose, I start new prospect conversations from Marian University. Obviously, that is the institution at which Maggie works. It shows in the message preview, and more messages. I would assume Maggie means she gets more responses that she's noticed when she does that particular thing. So there you go. It just tells you what the university is from. Try new things to see if you can get better open rates. I always say that. Donna sends in, as a retention specialist, first semester using Cadence, and I'm loving it. Thank you, Donna. We're glad. Just contacted approximately 350 students, and they definitely respond to a text more quickly than a phone call. However, many students just ignore both. To that, I would say, Donna, ignore is different than not read. So if a text is helpful, you might have given them all the information they need in that text. So ignored is strong. They just didn't respond to it. So you'll know at your institution whether or not your texts are working, if your retention is good. If texts are received well and they're helping, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll get a response. Does that sound right, Mike?
Yeah, that sounds exactly right. There's lots of examples where institutions text saying, "Hey, just a reminder, Greg, this is the form you're going to use to do X, Y, Z." So I mean, that's common. One of the things that institutions have to remember is response rate can be a bit of a vanity metric. It's the end goal ideally is, students respond, but we really want students to follow the next action, go to the next milestone. So as long as they're doing that, if they're responding to text, great. If they're not doing that, but texting, push them to do that, that's great as well.
Yeah, I would say look at the gaps. So if you are getting responses, like pay attention to when you have communicated with the student, with instructions on what to do, and how long it's been since you've heard from them, or how long it's been since that student has done what was needed for them to do. So always pay attention to the gaps, manage the gaps, as we say here at Mongoose. Donna followed up with, we must have a release signed by the student or we cannot give any information. Does that make sense to you?
True. Yeah, so most institutions will need a FERPA, a waiver. Now, I am much better with TCPA compliance than I am with FERPA compliance, but my sense would be that if you are giving parents the timelines for when grades are available, things like that, that would not be a violation. I think giving specific grades or specific information would be, but check with your general counsel there. But I think you would be fine to give people links to academic calendars, things like that.
Cool, thank you. Keep the questions coming. The Q&A box is there and we have more questions and we're having fun, which is the most important thing right here. And see how festive I am, Mike? It's the Mongoose claw with the Santa. I don't know, does it look like a Mongoose claw with a Santa hat on it? I'm hoping
I think it does.
Accomplish that.
I wore all black, which if we were aiming for a festivity,
we're the Johnny Cash webinar.
I did not understand the assignment, as the kids say.
Facile asked, is there a way to minimize retention? It's a great question.
I hope that means in terms of
the effort,
retention,
like put into
our
it?
Students. Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. I would imagine most institutions want to retain as many students as possible. I think it's, to Greg's point about managing the gaps, finding all the issues that lead to retention, study them, monitor them, track them. And I think most institutions on the enrollment management side do an amazing job of plotting, this is what our class is going to look like in the fall. This is where students come from. This is how we got those students. This is how we assembled our class. That doesn't happen usually from fall to spring. So I think managing from fall to spring and saying, okay, where was the dropout or stopouts? Why did those occur as much as we can tell? Have we followed up with those students? Have we offered them grants or some other incentive to maybe bring them back, either through state funding or through private donors that we have as an institution? All those are really good ways. But it starts with tracking and monitoring, because obviously if you do that, then you can start to make better assumptions about reasons, and then you can build your strategy accordingly from there. But yeah, I think overall too, just general engagement with your students. A number of institutions now will send text, usually the first week of each new semester, just saying, hey, how's everything going? How are your classes? How's the situation in the residence halls? All those are really good ways just to periodically check in. Those might come from a person in residence life. It might be a person in academic advising, might be a coach, but somebody should have those outreaches to students just to make sure they're doing well.
I agree. And a very broad best practice for retention, and it might even sound obvious, but it's not always obvious to everyone. And that is just to make everything as clear as possible. And by that, I mean, every communication you have, whether it's a text, an email, or just general information and how it's available on your website or social post, make sure that students know with that communication what is expected of them and when it is expected by. That's you don't want to have a 3 email exchange to tell the student a deadline date. Like, is it concise and clear as possible what's expected and when it is expected by. That's a good rule of thumb for, I guess, everything. But especially when it comes to student retention. Facile, if we did not answer that correctly and you need, more information is needed from that, like if we did a good job with that, that's great. If not, and we can, give you more on that, just let us know.
Yeah.
Okay.
We could follow up
next
offline
question.
if we had to. Yeah.
That's true. Yes. Oh, we'll put our information at the end of the screen. But I like to say this in the middle of the webinar as well. Mike and I love talking about higher ed. We love talking about retention and communication. I love tips on communication, subject line, stuff like that. So we say this every single webinar we do, but we really do truly mean it. And I have enjoyed corresponding with people afterwards. It's Mike or Greg at mongooseresearch.com. Email us. We'll have that up on the screen at the end of the webinar, but always feel free to reach out to us with questions or just to riff on communicating with students, because we honestly really do like doing that. I'm a nut about just communication in general and open rates and stuff like that. So love it. Question comes in from Miguel. What's a great text strategy to accomplish in the first month? I can already feel Mike's excitement over answering this. So this is, you have the first month. What's a great way to get started?
Yes. So a couple things. We talked about those check-ins. A really good example I have seen is an institution that first week will send, hey, using an emoji or a GIF, let us know how your first week's gone or your first month's gone. That's a really good strategy. I would argue that if you're starting to build a relationship with students after welcome weekend, you may have waited too long. So at orientation, the students should get a good sense of belonging with the institution. They should have met with their academic advisor, felt comfortable with that person. They should be able to navigate the campus a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it should really go beyond, all right, well, we've reached the first X number of days. It should be more of a strategy of, okay, well, we have these ongoing engagements. We're checking on students in particular stress points in the semester. So again, that first week is good, or first 2 weeks. Leading up to midterms is a good time as well, particularly for students who are either in their first year or who have just transferred to your institution. All those are good strategies.
Yes, and this wasn't asked, but I feel it's a good time to bring this up. We like to play the hits here at Mongoose. So it's possible that you've heard this before, but just like your favorite song, you can't hear this one enough. We get asked a lot, and we have not yet been asked at this webinar specifically, but it's a good time to bring them up. I am going to get to a point eventually. If you have not heard from a student in a long time and you're wondering why not, one of our partner schools had this great tip. It works so well. We hear so much feedback from this text that we like to say it as much as possible. Send a ghost emoji to the students and ask, are you ghosting me? If you haven't heard from them, you'd be amazed at what you get back in response to that. Like, it just seems to work very well. If that fits within your communication brand, I guess, and you feel comfortable doing that, like, it has worked really well for a lot of schools under our umbrella.
And I think one of the benefits of texting compared to other media is it can be more personalized and less formal than a letter would be, or an email even, or a phone call can come off. So because of the emojis, because you can send gifts and all those things, you can have a little bit more fun with your students. So absolutely, I would endorse that.
Yeah. And another thing we hear about is, because we have all different audiences just here on this webinar. And of course, our schools have lots of different, kinds of people reading their text. Emojis are universal. People of all ages love emojis. So some post-traditional student bases, we don't want to send emojis to adults. They didn't know adults love emojis. So I'm old. I love emojis. So don't be afraid to use one. Just make sure it fits within your quote unquote brand, I guess. I have another question, Mike, and this one came in pre-register. Thank you for sending in your questions, by the way. Keep them coming. Mike, we usually think of MELT over the summer with deposited students, but what can I do to help keep my early decision students engaged?
Oh, I love this. So your students who have applied early decision, they have done so knowing that if they were accepted, they have to withdraw applications to other institutions potentially, or if they want to maybe move to regular decision, if they choose not to make that call immediately. So these were students who have said, hey, I'm basically all in on this institution. So I think giving them more exclusive outreach, more exclusive content is important, maybe digging into more of the student experience, particularly in the time of year where they're going to receive that text, is a very, very good strategy. Don't forget about your parents of prospective students as well. Don't be afraid to text into them, and thank them for their student applying, and, offer an opportunity to answer questions. A couple institutions I work with now have some faculty answering text and sending out text and reminding people about particular signature programs. All those are very smart strategies and tactics.
Another question in, Mike. My question to you both is centered on alumni engagement. What have you seen other schools doing to increase alumni engagement in conjunction with new student prospecting and current student retention?
So not enough. We don't see a lot. We don't see a lot of alumni texting on behalf of, a retention team or a student outreach or student life team. I rarely see it on the prospective student area. I think it depends on the institution and the population you're working with. There's really no such thing as a traditional undergraduate anymore. But what we think of when we think first year undergrad is, usually that 17, 18, 19-year-old young adult, even though it's statistically not really true anymore. But that person is going through a lot in their life. They are balancing a lot in high school, and when they're transitioning to college, they're not thinking about that alumni experience usually. They're what they just went through in high school, thinking about that first year experience. They're thinking about notoriously difficult professors that they've heard of, all those sorts of things. So this idea of alumni hasn't even have reached them. So for prospective students, I should say for your prospective high school students that are coming into college, I would reach out to the parents with those alumni and say, hey, I'm 10 years out. This is what I'm doing for a living. These are the outcomes. These are the challenges I would anticipate your student would have. And we have this amazing alumni community that is ready to welcome them and help them and support them after they graduate. And even as students, for current students, usually, if when I've seen alumni engagements, it is typically very decentralized and around particularly affinity groups. So, for example, all the former student body presidents and the student senate or student government, and that's fine. You can do those sorts of things with academic programs as well. So, I would say that schools shouldn't be afraid to allow like a texting takeover from alumni in particular academic programs, and just have them text those students and say, hey, how is internships going? Like, how are you handling Dr. Smith's notoriously hard financial accounting class? Is there anything we can do as alumni to help out? And part of this too is not just the retention aspect. One of the things we want to do with our prospective students, and then especially our current students when they enroll, is we want to create a sense of philanthropy and an identity with the institution, with their alma mater. So the more we can remind people that, hey, in a few short years, you're going to be part of this alumni community, and you were helped, and you got these resources. So we kind of want you to pay it forward. The more you do that, the easier it's going to be for your colleagues in advancement to get that engagement and those volunteers and potentially those donors in the future.
It is. I don't know if this question came from someone that was sent anonymously who was from an advancement department or someone involved in retention, but I guess the lesson is that teamwork works. Departments can help each other in this respect, and like Mike said, it's not done as much as it should be, I guess. We had a question about a good amount of time to contact students before they get annoyed and message overboard. Basically texting or emailing someone too much. We touched on that. If you're just joining us, this recording will be emailed to you afterwards. So you can hear our great answer on that. It was great. Facile sends in a question. If you are hosting an event, is it bad to text twice in a week? Once a few days before and then the day off? I'll try this one, Mike, and see what you think. For something like an event, I don't know if you want to text twice, but you might know more about that and what's worked with some of the schools that you work with. So something very important, like a deadline reminder that they have to hit up. 2 texts in a week might be fine. What do you think about an event? Is 2 texts in a week too much?
I think it depends on what it is. So you might send your accepted students, as an example, your current students, a list of events that are coming up, and you might text them Monday before a Saturday open house and say, hey, would you like to come to open house this Saturday? Here's the speakers, here's the venues, here's a link, blah, blah, blah. And I think if you were to do that and then maybe the following Friday, the day before the event, follow up and say, hey, thank you so much for signing up. Let me know. You can text me at this number if you have any questions with parking or how to get around. I think that's fine. I think if they have all the resources in front of them, again, I would trust your students to look at those resources and follow them. And again, a lot of times students will tell you. You have to initiate the conversation, but once you've done that, I find that I shouldn't say most, but a solid percentage of students will not feel bashful following up with you and saying, I don't know how to get to this building or what time is the session via text.
Yeah. Omni-channel approach works really, really well. So if you're worried, should I text them twice in a week? Well, like we said before, maybe send an email, send a text that directs to the email, create an event page if you can that maybe the email links to that tells people, hey, frequently asked questions, where do I park? You know, if it's an event in particular, how many tickets are left, that kind of thing. So if it's like a ticketed event, I could see sending two texts, you know, we're almost sold out on this, like that kind of thing. But yeah, but omni-channel always is the best answer.
Absolutely.
All right. All right. Susan sends in a question. For someone who might not be up on the latest emojis or texting trends, what are some resources to keep up to date other than mongooseresearch.com and subscribing to our blog? Like that's one way to do it, but Mike, maybe you have another resource available.
One of my favorite links on the internet is Emojipedia. I believe it's emojipedia.com or .org. I'd have to look. But Emojipedia, if you Google it, you'll find it. Emojipedia will show you what every emoji ever in the world looks like on different phones. It will tell you if there's any, to put this delicately, double entendres or double meanings with emojis.
Very important.
So you
very
know if you
important.
yes. So you know before you send whatever face, you can know like, oh God, that's actually really inappropriate. You can like be aware of those things and be prepared for all that.
It's something as simple as the cry emoji and the sweat emoji, like the tear. The bead of water is like just from here to here. It's the difference between sweating and crying. So I know it sounds stupid.
I didn't know that.
I sound like my dad talking right now, but like there is a resource you can go to and actually like look at. The government's going to know you were there, but like there's a resource you can go to and actually look at and know the differences in these emojis. So
and one of the great tools in Cadence, particularly when you use Chrome, is if you just right click in your conversation and you can click on emojis. So we preload I think hundreds of emojis in the platform, but I think there's thousands that are registered. So you could click on that emojis and symbols and pull anything available to you there. So if you wanted to pull a, I don't know, the Peruvian flag and put it in a text, you could do that using that trick in Chrome.
I use that flag constantly. Like, do you know what the chair emoji is?
No, I'm not familiar with the chair emoji.
This is maybe someone, I think that students, let's call them kids, are now using a chair emoji. They've just decided that instead of using LOL, it's now a chair emoji, and that means LOL. Maybe Emojipedia has more on this, but that's the rumor going around the marketing department in Mongoose. We're starting to use the chair emoji in Slack, and it'll be hilarious if we are the only department on earth using it, but I think that's a thing. So look into that. That was really irresponsible of me, but it's just a chair emoji. I think that's a thing.
Mackenzie is validating what you're saying.
Mackenzie does. Thank you, Mackenzie.
Mackenzie, thank you for looking out for us old people.
That is right. Yeah. I am so old. I grew up playing Atari 2600. And I graduated college without the internet. That's my claim to fame. Donna sends in, my job is to contact students who are at risk of failing. So I'm pretty sure when students see my text or phone number, they automatically connect me with bad news. Any suggestions? Earlier in the semester, my supervisor does send out an encouraging text to developmental students, but that has our name on it. I would say if it's somewhat good news, or if it even could be construed in a good way, start off the text with good news, exclamation point. So if it's something you want to send that is encouraging, that could be good news. Like literally start the text with good news if you think it's good news. Mike, what do you think?
Right. And in some cases, students do need to hear bad news if students aren't progressing well, and sometimes it's good for them to get a reality check and understand that, hey, they need to do XYZ so they can advance the next semester, persist, graduate on time, etc. So I wouldn't necessarily hide from the bad news. I would say be careful on your tone. That's probably maybe what scares people. So, reminding them that, hey, there's still time for you to right the ship academically. Here's some resources available to you. Please call me back so I can, set you up with a tutor, set you up with some study hall time, those sorts of things. Again, the spirit of the text and the authenticity of you reaching out in a very genuine human way is really a guiding light to all the text you're ever going to send.
And Mike, you said this earlier. I think you even used these two words. I think they're a great pairing of words to use in this type of situation. And that's, I understand. Like, I understand this might be difficult to hear. Like empathize with the student, because you do understand what your students are going through, and you do understand also that you can help them. So those two little words, I think, work great. We understand what you're going through, or I understand what you're going through. Here's how to better this situation, depending on what the situation is. Jamaica text sends in, have you experienced a change in the amount of text and or information texted based on the type of students the institution serves? If so, what differences have you noticed? That's one to ponder there. Yeah. I'm not sure.
I would say I have not seen it by type of institution. Where I've seen it is usually the use case, right? So if you're in undergraduate admissions, or you're in the annual fund or athletics, or different areas will have different frequencies in which they text, and obviously different message copy, etc. But that's very interesting. I've never really thought of that. And now that I have that thought in my brain, I'm going to start really kind of thinking about that.
So I didn't really understand it. Like, when someone asks about a change in how things are being done right now, first thing I go to is COVID. Like, have you experienced a change in the amount of text and information texted? Is that question COVID related? Because everything's different now. So yes, of course, things are different this time of year because students need more support, or at least this last year and a half, I'm sure your school's texting strategy has completely changed just based on that information. So that's the first thing I thought of, and I wasn't sure if that's what was being asked. But
yeah, I think in the context of COVID,
change things.
Yeah, in the context of COVID, I've definitely seen an uptick in the amount of text sent, particularly around students, either getting vaccinated or getting, a waiver, an exemption, etc. If they needed one of those. So that's true. I've seen an uptick in that. Different areas are texting now too. It's very interesting in light of everything happening with the pandemic. More areas that are more student health or student conduct are texting in a lot more. Some students, and again, this is coming secondhand from administrators that I work with, it seems as if some students more than ever are transitioning into college in a very awkward way. That they really just, their expectations are kind of all over the place on what the campus experience should be like. Maybe they're a bit hesitant because they've heard from older brothers and sisters, or friends that, dining hall's closed now, or these sorts of things. So I think being able to attack and address those things is really important.
It's interesting. And that is also where something like alumni participation could help in that. Like, I've been through this, it's worth it. Here's what I got out of it. Those kind of stories can certainly help. Part of our hesitation is around respecting students' time off during the holiday break and not wanting to frustrate students by asking them to complete onboarding registration tasks during that time. How do you navigate a soft reminder while respecting their time off? So kind of a different version of a question asked, Mike, but I'm not sure if it being asked differently changes your answer at all.
Not much. I mean, again, the tone is going to drive everything there, right? So if the tone is attention, Greg, we're missing this form, that's not going to go over well. But just saying, Greg, I hope you enjoy your break. Just an FYI, we need you to get, XYZ done before you can come back in the dorms next semester. Please call me on this date when you get a chance, so we can set up those arrangements. That's, I think, super appropriate.
Yeah, and you also can't say Merry Christmas, where's your form?
Right. He's like, or Happy Holidays.
Got to be a good ending
inclusive.
And a good beginning. Yes.
Right.
Right. Happy holidays, where's your form? All right, that's we have no more questions that have come in. I think we've covered everything.
Wow.
But we are also available to hang out afterwards. So here is our contact information. Mike and I are on the LinkedIn, and we'd love to connect with you there. I like to have Mike's name up on screen because I wouldn't even try and spell it out loud. It's pronounced Kochczynski, and he's awesome and knows a lot of things. So connect with us on LinkedIn. Send us emails. We like to answer questions, and thank you to everyone who sent in a question. More information is available, of course, at mongooseresearch.com. As I mentioned before, we write tons of cool blogs and videos and case studies and everything like that. And you can subscribe to them and get them daily into your inbox. I think that I am going to go back to the Q&A because it just popped up. Someone panicked and wanted to make sure a question got in before it ended. So Donna has one more question, Greg, exclamation point. Has anyone ever told you you look and sound like Dax Shepard? Now I'm mad I brought it up. I don't even know who Dax Shepard is. So I'm going to, who's Dax Shepard?
Is he not married to Kristen Bell, I believe?
I don't know which one's Kristen Bell. There's so many Kristens.
He's the antagonist in the Dane Cook classic Employee of the Month.
Oh, they're the ones in the Target commercial. Is that who?
Yes.
Is that Dex?
I believe. Donna, Parenthood, right, yes. Donna, thank you. That guy.
Yeah.
Yes. Donna, you are an incredible resource.
And to answer your question, yes, Donna, it happened in a webinar that I was doing for Mongoose out of nowhere. So good, I guess. Those Target commercials are cute, I guess. Thanks, Mike. Anything else to put a bow on our retention / winter melt webinar that we had for the people here at Mongoose today?
Yeah, as always, tone, authenticity, that will lead the way, be the guiding principle for all the texting you're doing. Avoid anything robotic, keep it personalized, keep it human, and you'll do fine.
All right. Thanks, Mike, for answering the questions. You always do a great job. Thanks for all the questions you sent in and from everyone here at Mongoose. Have a great day.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
I just said that.
Sorry. People are still on, Greg.
All right. Bye, everyone.